welcome to Community Forum, a service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernández. Education is called the key to success, and often, individuals receive the most benefits from education in their childhood and teen years. But what happens when someone misses out on that during that time, and instead of opportunity, they encounter walls? What resources are available to them? Often there are few, but some organizations are working to change that. In Chicago, one such organization is Year Up. And here to talk about their work, we have Alan Anderson, the Executive Director of Year Up Chicago, and Leasia Clark, a graduate of the program. Welcome.
Thank you.
First, we're going to start out by talking about your passion for education, Alan. Why is there such a passion for education?
So I've always had a belief that if you have access to education, you can be successful long term. And that was really instilled at an early age based on my father. He was a single dad, given my mother passed away really early. And he invested in my education and my brother and my sister. And I saw the opportunities that created for us. And so I've always had a passion about education and know how important it is. And so I've always been focused on giving others a similar path because I know that the success that can come out of it.
Where did you grow up, and what experiences did you have?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in Chicago, but I did grow up in Detroit, and much of that time spent in Detroit. It was an era where there was a lot of I'd say tragedy in the city, kind of a height of violence in the city. And so there were a lot of moments that could lead you down the wrong path. But fortunately for me, my dad really cared about making sure we had good educational opportunities. And in doing so, I was afforded an opportunity to go to a really good high school. And one thing that high school instilled in me was this kind of belief in men for others and supporting my fellow man or woman in order to make them basically receive the same types of benefits that I had. And so that passion that was instilled in me as I went through high school became kind of the catalyst for how I ultimately supported the elementary school that I went to while in high school. When I went to college, I supported after-school programming at a variety of high schools, and that kind of carried me even into my current professional career, which is really focused on providing educational opportunities for those who don't ordinarily have them.
Okay, Leasia, tell me about your background and some of the struggles you faced growing up, because this program, we'll get into the details of the program, but tell me about your experience with education.
Well, my experience with education was not so bad in grammar school, but as I got older and went to high school, I went to a relatively, some would say, not so good high school, and I witnessed a lot of, just teachers having to be disciplinaries instead of teaching, focusing on things that we as students bring from home. And it was really hard, but I got through it.
This was in Chicago?
Yes, in Chicago. I was raised on the northwest side, Wicker Park.
Okay, and that obviously was difficult for you. What exactly did you kind of go through in high school that you saw that wasn't working, besides the disciplinary stuff? What other issues did you see?
Found that it was a shortage in textbooks and teachers' resources as far as markers, even to the markers writing on the board. They wouldn't have those different things that you need to teach day to day. And if that's a shortage, like computers would be a shortage. That would, we would have a certain amount of time per class to be on a computer instead of the whole class being able to. So just everything that we shouldn't have to worry about as a student and as a teacher, the school's worried about.
Okay, a lot of limitations there.
Yes, a lot of limitations.
Didn't allow for growth. Now, this is the type of student that Year Up tends to focus on, not necessarily in high school, but right out after high school, correct? Or that high school dropout, perhaps.
Yeah, yep, that's correct.
Tell me about how the program came about and how it works.
Sure. So the program was founded in 2000 in Boston. And what we do is we work with low-income young adults ages 18 to 24, predominantly African American and Hispanic, who are currently out of school and out of work, and with no real pathway to either one of those in a persistent way. And so we focused on giving them 6 months of college credited technical and professional skills, and then a 6-month internship, with the goal of kind of taking them from being in that lower or low income status to being in a meaningful wage that they can sustain in a professional career.
Okay, and what inspired the idea? Who was the founder?
Yeah, so our organization was inspired by our founder, Gerald Chertavian, and he was really moved by a relationship that he had working with a young man in the Big Brothers program. And he was at that time working on Wall Street, and he began to mentor this young man who he felt deserved access to an opportunity because he knew how bright he was. He just happened to grow up in the wrong zip code, a zip code that was filled with violence and at the height of crack and AIDS and everything else that was kind of going on in that era. And so Gerald made a commitment to David, that's the young man's name, and said, if you are able to graduate through high school, I will pay for you to go to college as long as you maintain a good GPA. And so David lived up to his end of the bargain, and Gerald made the commitment. And during that time, Gerald was so inspired by what he saw at that point was this huge divide and opportunity. He ended up writing an essay to get into Harvard Business School, and he talked about if he were able to graduate and attend this university, he was going to create an organization that would be focused on closing that divide, which at that point was kind of called the digital divide, like access to technology and access to information, and given a lot of communities didn't have that opportunity. So he did get into Harvard, which was great, and then he, at the conclusion, worked in the private sector for a little while longer, co-founded a software company that he sold in the late 90s. And as you can imagine, selling a software company in the late 90s is pretty lucrative. So, so he used the proceeds of that to start the organization Year Up in 2000. And since that time, he's seen nearly 8,000 young adults go through 11 different sites around the country, all with that same goal of having a few barriers after graduating high school, and not necessarily a meaningful path towards a livable wage and a professional career. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 13 years.
Okay, and how do you reach out? How do you make yourselves known to these young adults? They may be disconnected from educational institutions completely. So
Absolutely. So there's 3 main ways in which we identify students. The first is we do leverage the public school system. So even when a young man or young woman graduates from high school or completes a GED program, you still have people who are kind of post-secondary counselors or people who kind of work in life after high school, who often refer students and say, hey, here's an organization that might be something of use to you. So that's one source. The second source is a lot of service agencies in our city, whether it be services around housing or childcare or aging out of foster care, often have as a prerequisite of service that you receive that you need to be either in school or in a meaningful job. And so given the fact that Europe provides that, they often refer candidates that are their clients to our program. And then the third way, which I think is more, I'd say our largest growing segment now, is the word of mouth, leveraging our students and alums. So we've served over 300 in our Chicago market. And so you can imagine 300 spokespeople around the city who have maybe graduated, who are basically standing on that same train platform on, out on the Green Line in Inglewood, and they're wearing their suit and their tie, and they're like, well, where are you going? And it's like, no, I'm not going to a funeral. I'm actually going to go work downtown. A person may say, well, how did you do that? And we say, well, come with me and you can learn about this wonderful organization called Year Up.
Wow. And Leasia, how did you find out about Year Up, and how did you go through that process of deciding to become part of it, and who told you about it, and how did you finally become part of the organization?
I heard about Year Up from my grandfather, and he heard it from someone else. I took the time to research the organization, and what I saw online interests me, and I applied, and I went through the competitive application process that they do have, and I was accepted.
How competitive is that process?
I am a Class 3 alum, and there were over 200 applicants, and there were only 40 students in my class. The final of those over 200 was only 40 of us who were accepted. We went through multiple interviews. We had 2 individual interviews, 1 group interview. We had to write an essay. We also were given a test of, comprehension and math and just some problems, a word problem. It was a little complicated. It asked about how many McDonald's do you think are in the city? And at first it scared me, and I'm like, how can I possibly know? I know I eat a lot of McDonald's. But I thought to myself, okay, they probably want to see how you think. Well, how does my brain work? Am I able to try to comprehend this question? Can I make some type of logic, get some type of logic out of it? And I guess I did, so I was accepted.
That's great. Now, what were you dealing with personally? You don't have to get into a lot of detail on that, but what kind of difficulties were you facing in your life at that moment?
At that moment, I had been in the Austin neighborhood. I moved west to the Austin neighborhood, and I have a young daughter. I had a young daughter at the age of 17, getting out of high school, and it was just a lot of violence and crime and drugs and things that were starting to become normal to me, which should never become normal, to anybody, let alone a teen or, a child.
And once you found out you were in the program, how did you know that something, or once you were in the program itself, when did you realize this was going to be something that would change your life?
I realized that the program would change my life after they take us to visit different corporate partners or even just huge corporations. We got to go to Microsoft, and we got to, be behind the scenes and hear about what goes on and how they come up with these ideas. And it just made me realize how big, something so small could be. And at the time, I'm only class 3. Gerald only had an idea, the founder, so all of these small ideas that I've grew up with, everything could become as big as I want it to be, or I could just stay stuck in a mindset. So I feel like they opened my mind by exposing me to just people who started out with ideas.
So in some sense, what you're saying is that vision of limitations of the neighborhood, of crime, of your own difficulties it opened the world to you. Europe opened up your vision and to see yourself differently and the world differently.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned corporations. Now, Ellen, how does Europe form these relationships, maintain these relationships, and how does it connect these young adults to these corporations and keep that as a symbiotic relationship?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work that goes into making sure we have strong partnerships. And Leasia, for example, when she was in the program, she worked with UBS, and that's a strong partner. A few things that I think are important to note. So given our mission is to try to provide young folks like Leasia, young adults like Leasia, the opportunity to be connected to mainstream livable wage beyond the program, we need to make sure that the types of skills that she's trained in or developed in are ones that could be that could ultimately propel her career long term in a sustained way. And so when you look at the marketplace around job opportunities, particularly for those who are in the middle skilled, so more than a high school diploma, less than a 4-year degree, there's actually a large number of jobs that are going to be vacant over the next decade. So it looks like there'll be nearly 14 million over the next decade.
14 million?
Yeah, in that segment. And what's interesting about that is there are certain high demand fields like information technology and healthcare and manufacturing where there are a lot of job opportunities. So when we started the organization, we wanted to focus on information technology, or IT, because we knew that that was a high demand field that employer partners would be excited about bringing on talent. And so as we went out to engage different employer partners, we'd say, look, we want to be able to solve your needs. And we know that with the ever-growing and changing needs of technology based on how organizations run their businesses, we wanted to say, hey, we have an entry-level talent source that you can leverage, that's pre-screened, pre-trained, that we know is going to deliver at a really high rate, would you be willing to consider taking on an intern? And what we found is over and over again, corporations in the city of Chicago were willing to do that. So we've had over 40 companies since our founding in September of 2010 sign on to take talent. And that number actually will increase by another 7 starting in a couple of weeks when we start our next class of interns. So the fact that companies say, hey, you know what, you are really good at identifying talent that's of a non-traditional source. So typically they may go to their 4-year schools and say, hey, can you find me a new person? And they decided to leverage us because we provide really high quality people who do an exceptional job. So we knew that on the employer side, and then on the student side in our city, in our market, and you know this also, that there are a lot of young adults who are kind of currently disconnected from educational opportunities and career opportunities. And so that number, even in Chicago, is nearly 70,000 people.
70,000?
Mm-hmm. And
wow.
so we knew, we had an obligation to try to identify those young people who were very motivated, who ultimately wanted access to an opportunity, and we would connect them to those same employer partners who have talent needs. And so that's how the relationship works. We spend time understanding the relationship and the needs of those employer partners, and we spend a lot of time understanding our students to make an appropriate match. And so when you look at Leasia and her particular match with UBS, we looked at her personality, we looked at the skills she developed while in the program around information technology, and said, UBS, based on your needs and based on the specific projects that you have, it seems like she would be a great fit. And we were right, because now she still works there after graduating the program. So, and I think it really comes down to having employer partners who are willing to take time to invest in the talent, and also takes folks like Leasia to do an exceptional job once they're there.
Wow. Leasia, tell me about that experience of going into a corporation and becoming an intern and then staying on. And the day-to-day and how that worked with you, and what it made out of you.
Okay, well, UBS is a global firm that provides financial services to private, corporate, and institutional clients. And me in particular, I work in global asset management. So my day-to-day, I deal with estate management. Globally, I deal with forecast planning, and I also deal with managing and tracking a state that's already up. So it was really hard. I thought I would be getting busy work once I got there, but I had a desk, I sat, and I became a part of the team. My manager made sure that as an intern, I was going to get the best experience possible. So if I was not able to stay on, I would be able to go someplace else with those skills that I acquired at UBS. I'm sitting at my desk and I'm traveling the world. I get to, speak to people in, Europe and Asia. It's just phenomenal, and it teaches me. It helped, like growing up where I grew up and now being where I am, I think it made me a better person as far as adapting to different environments. I'm able to be myself, and it's nothing I can't learn at UBS.
And how long have you been there now?
A little over a year and a half.
A year and a half?
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. And do you plan to stay there, or have you?
I plan to stay at UBS for as long as possible, but the good thing about being there is the support that they have. So if something happened and I was not able to, I'm sure I would leave with references and different connections. As I've been at UBS and I'm building my network, every day I'm branching out, meeting new people, going to events, and I'm constantly being, I'm constantly representing Gear Up, and I'm just gaining that exposure. So I feel like if I wasn't at UBS, I can go anywhere in the world now.
Tell me, through this growth of your network, who have you met, and how have you connected to people in, maybe not in the same field, but in a related field?
Since I've been at UBS, I've met different managing directors, and that's a very high level at the company. I've also been able to speak at the Clinton Global Initiative representing Europe and UBS. So I've met a few women in different organizations. I was nominated for something called the Kale Award, and it's an award that highlights young adults who have overcome, a lot of different obstacles. So it's a vast number of people that I've met. I can go and get my cards out of the car if you want, just lay them on the table. But I'm constantly meeting people, and I'm making an effort to reach back out to them, to, sit and, have coffee sometimes, just to build that relationship. So I'm not just meeting people and not doing anything with it.
Wow. Ellen, she said the word, you said the word, relationship. One of the keys I'm hearing here is the building of relationships. Besides UBS, what other strong or rather big corporations here in Chicago have been very involved with Year Up?
So so there's three main areas of types of firms that we've had invest in our work. So there's the firms that are in the financial markets, so folks like UBS, but then JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, people like Citadel, the Federal Reserve Bank, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Goldman Sachs. So a lot of these firms in the financial area have been investors. You have folks in the field of consulting like Accenture, who are partners. You've had folks in the healthcare like Rush Medical University and Vanguard Health System. So we've had a kind of a myriad of different companies who've decided to take advantage of our talent. And the great thing is, given the majority of our students come in having and ultimately are trained in kind of level 1 desktop support or help desk, or leveraging a little bit of their project management and customer service skills that they learn through those same technical skills, they're able to go into any company and provide that value, which is really, really great. I wanted to also talk a little bit about one of the things that I think is important to note about how it also happens for the students. So the relationships with those companies make a huge difference. I think the part that was really inspiring, just listening to Leasia talk about her own journey, is the fact that she understands the value of her network. And I think a lot of that comes from really early on in the process at Year Up. We spend a lot of time really building community, and we do that through a belief around high support and high expectations. So the students receive a myriad of supports, one of which is education. So she gets, she earned up to 18 hours in partnership with city colleges. She had the benefit of working at UBS, which is experience, which is a second support. She had an educational stipend when she was in the program. And then lastly, she had a lot of caring adults who were able to surround her, whether it be advisors from the staff, professional mentors, guest speakers, and a lot of other volunteers who basically engaged her. So what happened was she got to a point where she was very comfortable engaging with people regardless of where they came from. And now she sees that as an asset as she continues to build her professional career. And at the same time, we hold very high standards, which prepares her for the professional environment she's going to go to. So they sign a contract from day one, contract stipulating being on time, dressed professionally, working well with others. And when there's a violation of that contract, there's a consequence, and we use a demerit system, and we start with points, and if you deduct your points to 0, you fire yourself from the program. And we use that language intentionally because we want to make sure that the student understands the expectations around where they're headed. And I think with having those two things in place, that high support and high expectations, it raises the game for Leasia. So then when she goes to UBS, she's ready. She's prepared. She knows the environment she's going to engage in. She's been supported by people who are going to hold her to high standards, and then when she goes, she executes, and then that's where you end up working there a year and a half later, and probably longer than that. So.
Right. So students, after a period of time, if they're not responding, not doing what they signed on the contract, they fire themselves.
Exactly right.
There are consequences like there would be in the professional world.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And there's two reasons, and the first of which is the way you stated it. We're preparing them for professional environments, and so people expect you to be on time, dependable, reliable employees. That's a norm, right? If we're scheduled to meet to have an interview and I show up several hours late, you'd probably have a different opinion, right? And so that's just the norm. I think the second reason, which I think we all can agree with as well, is it's a measure of respect for our young adults. So given the challenges we talked about at the earlier onset of the program around violence and all these other challenges, crime and all these other things that we see in our city, knowing that if I maintain a lowered expectation, said, oh, because you're from here, or because you went to this school, or these are some challenges in your family, I'm going to marginalize you by saying it's okay that you're going through that, and it doesn't matter, and I'm not going to hold you to higher standards. It's not really fair to her. It's much better to say, hey, you know what? I realize these are things that are going on, but I believe that if I hold you to higher standards, you're going to achieve. Because I respect you enough to tell you it's important to use appropriate subject-verb agreement in your language.
Right.
It's important to dress up a certain way so that people get a different perception of you. And that's the thing that I think our students really appreciate, because it shows that people are really caring about what they ultimately want for them, and not just for the person asking or delivering that feedback.
Right, you're holding them to a standard you know they can achieve.
Absolutely.
You mentioned just a bit ago that working with the city colleges, that's one of the partnerships you have.
That's right.
Outside of the business world. Tell me about those type of partnerships that what Europe has.
Yeah, so we have an educational partner in City Colleges of Chicago, and so Harold Washington College is our accrediting body for our students, and that's obviously very beneficial, particularly to the student. I'd say if I take a step back and I think about what I want for Leasia as she graduates the program, the thing that I say is I want her to be able to have the mentality she has, where regardless of whether she continues with UBS or not, she's got the right skills, she's got the right network, and she's got some tools in her toolkit that allow her to persist in whatever career field she wants. So whether it be education, so you get college credits and you're able to persist in college, and now you're able to move forward. Whether it be certifications through industry partners like CompTIA, so they certify you in a level of proficiency around your information technology skills. And so those particular industry credentials have appreciable value in terms of salary you can command. And so our students can place for those same industry certifications through the relationship with CompTIA. Similarly with Microsoft, you can take Microsoft certifications and get the opportunity to then place and then get jobs based on having a certain credential. I think, so that's on the educational side. I think on the student services side, one of the things that's really important to us is to make sure that while Leasia and all of our other students were in the program or are in the program, they have access to meaningful supports outside. So we have licensed clinical social worker on staff, and we have social work interns who are there to kind of manage challenges outside. So we have strong partnerships with folks like Teen Living, Salem Mission, a bunch of other service agencies around the city who are able to help manage and mitigate challenges students may face outside, so that there's a very holistic support system in place so that Leasia can stay focused on the opportunity that she's being presented with.
It's surrounding
Absolutely.
the individual with a great network of support then.
So
Absolutely.
you can't fail.
You can't fail. Okay, we're pretty much done with the program. Leasia, what would you say to a person that's thinking about joining the program?
I would
As quickly as you can.
encourage them to join the program simply because I'm sure they'll be provided with a structure and foundation that allows them to set goals and overcome obstacles.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
This is very inspirational, and I hope to have you back someday.
Thank
you. Appreciate your time.
Community Forum is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Community Forum for local issues and concerns every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernández. Thank you for joining us.